And I was like, yes. I didn't know what film meant. I just like, I'm rich. I am rich. I have millions of dollars.
Hi everybody, Elliot Wallach here on the set of Wind Calls the Heart. A dream come true. I finally get to have a one-on-one interview with Kavan Smith. Kavan, thanks for coming on the program.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure.
So the thing I love people that go for it, and I love people that push through it, right? And I saw some of that in your career, because just to kind of make sure I've got it established, you were going to go into economics.
Yeah.
Of all things, what was the end game there? What were you hoping to?
Very stupidly, it's a good little short story. When I was growing up, I didn't have a great childhood, and I was a little bit lost. And when I finished high school, it was just expected that you would go to university, and my high school grades were terrible, but in the last semester I pulled it together thinking I had to. And that year, the university, at this point it was the University of Calgary, and their mark, I think, to get in that year was an 82, and I just scraped by because I got like 100 in gym. That pulled my basic GPA up just to get in. And so I went, but I had no idea what I was doing. And my father was a businessman, and he ran an annuity company in sort of the insurance world. And I just figured, well, I guess you just go sort of towards what your dad does. And so I went economics, kind of pre-law, would have worked with what he did and maybe move into my dad's company somehow. And I did a year there, and it was awful. It was great in so many ways, because I realized this isn't, I could never have done that.
Right.
I just could never have done that. And so the university very politely, I dropped a couple of classes, which was very fortuitous, because if I hadn't, I would have got under review. They would have kicked me out. In this case, the department called me in, the faculty called me in and said, so, doesn't seem to be going super well for you here. If you withdraw from all your courses, you won't go under review. In which case you can come back. You have up to a year to decide what you want to do. Come back using your high school grades and do something that you might enjoy.
What a cool deal.
It was a good deal.
That's a nice thing.
Yep, so I was like, all right. I dropped it all happily and then left, and still had no clue what I was going to do. And I think I mentioned this to you before. I talked to my mom. I think I went to visit her within a day or two of this, and I hadn't told my father yet that I dropped out. And she was like, okay, so that makes sense. That was a good offer. What do you want to do? And I think that's the first time anybody had ever asked me that. That just, back in 1988, no one asked those questions, and before that. So I just thought, geez, a good question. And so we talked about it, and I ended up, I've mentioned this to you before, so just ended up with acting. And then I went back to university and in the theater arts program. And then I was lucky. I mean, every single semester, there was academic courses that had to be done as well. And every semester was the dean's honor roll, the president's honor roll. And you couldn't get me out of there. I couldn't stop. I just loved it. Wow. And I got hooked up with some guys in our group that were competitive. Like, right. Oddly enough, in a theater group, they were kind of some guys. Right, and they were competitive in not just the stuff we had to do for stage and acting, the plays, but with the other classes as well. So we studied, and I'd never studied a day in my life. Suddenly, we're just, every day after school, we're in the library, like 4, 5, 6 of us, just drilling each other on things. And then running plays, and school was 5:30 in the morning to 10:30 at night every single day, and I couldn't get enough of it.
Okay, so you've got your very close friend Ronnie.
Yes.
That you guys would go out and do some of the most hilarious stories I've ever heard in my life.
Well, I don't know if they were all that funny, but we thought they were funny at the time.
I did the same kind of stuff. Yeah. One of the things like we would do, my best friend and I, we would fake like fighting in front of the theater, and then people would gather around to watch the fight. We'd slowly morph it into a kung fu fight, like where we'd been talk like the movies and everything. That's the kind of stuff you guys would do, but on steroids.
Well, without the cool fighting aspect, we would literally just act like idiots, and we had skits where we would be like, we pretend we didn't know each other. Right. So we'd sit on a bus, and he would have a name, and I would have a name, and it'd be just like, hey, you looking at me? And the guy'd be like, I'm not looking at you, but if I want to look at you, I'll just look at you. And sometimes old ladies would move to the back of the bus, and we just up it a notch, and we would talk in accents. He was the Ayatollah of rock and roll, I remember before. I think he liked to call me Grand Poobah, and we had all these just skits, and we would just get, and every once in a while we'd get a guy that was kind of hip to it, and he goes, "You guys should take this on the road." That was really funny. So it was just, it gave me a rush that I hadn't. Sports gave me a rush. Loved playing football. That wasn't going to work out. So this was maybe even more of a rush. And when I got my first day of theater school, there's a whole bunch of stories that intertwine here. But on my very first day of theater school, we had what they call movement class, and physicality, and everybody there, like, I'd never done an acting class in my life. All of these people had done professional theater. They'd all spent all of their high school in theater group, and I'd never done any of it. And I showed up, and they're all in leotards and ballet outfits. And the first thing that the teacher says, and she's an ex-ballet dancer, and I'm wearing an Iron Maiden shirt and some camouflage shorts. And she's like, "Okay, everybody, find your bubble. Find your bubble." And I was like, what? Is this part of the curriculum? Were we supposed to be given bubbles? I don't understand what's happening. So everybody jumps into their bubble. And then she's like, "Okay, explore your bubble." And all these people in leotards walking around. I'm like, I've made a horrible, horrible mistake. And, but luckily I stuck it out, and,
that is hilarious.
yeah, it was
That's
really
day
well.
one?
That was day one. I think it was the first class.
So
of
economics
day
started
one.
looking pretty good?
Yeah, I was like, I gotta go back. I gotta go back in economics, because I was like, how does this pay? Where is the payoff in this? And
That's hilarious. But once it came together, and you're finding, this is the part I'm curious about. Like, you're enjoying it, and you're loving it, and you're competitive with your buddies. I gotta think you'd call Ronnie and go, "Dude, I have found the promised land."
it's so interesting because Ronnie, even though we're super close, he moved away in grade 12. And back then there was no internet. We sent the odd mail. We'd send funny letters once in a while. But he went off on his way and I went on my way. And we didn't really reconnect until I got my first film gig, which was a TV show, the first TV audition I'd done out of theater school. So there was a few years there where we didn't talk. So I remember calling him the very first day. I tracked his mom down, I think, and got his number from his mom. So I called Ron up, and he was living out on the East Coast, and I'm like, "Hey," and so we had a big talk. It was great, long time no talk. And he's like, "So what are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, actually, I'm an actor now." And he's like, "Whatever, whatever." I'm like, "No, I am, and I'm on a TV show, and it airs tonight. The first thing is tonight." And he's like, and Ronnie and I are exquisite liars. Exquisite. And I don't say that with a ton of pride, but it is, we are incredibly good at it. And I remember one time I called him and said, "Hey, dude, you're not going to believe this, but I found a bag with $5 million in it." And he's like, "Yeah, whatever." And I worked for 45 minutes and I got him to believe me. So when I told him that I was an actor, he's like, "No way, I'm not falling for the bag of money thing again." And but I was on a show, so he called me the next morning. He's like, and he called me the character's name. He's like, "What? What happened?" And I told him the story, and told him, like, "Yeah, it's partially because of you that I ended up doing this."
And okay, so then you graduated. How long was it before you landed your first gig?
It wasn't very long. I finished, we graduated, and my friend of my dad's got me a job at the golf and country club as a waiter. I was terrible. And my dad also hired me to work in his office as his receptionist for a while because he had fired his receptionist. So I had two jobs, both of which I hated. Hated. Right. And I got this audition from a local Calgary casting director who I think at the time there might have been just one, but she was the one, and a big show was in Calgary called Lonesome Dove, so she was doing some stuff. And she had called the school asking if they had any kind of guys that would fit a muscly motorcycle type role. I rode a motorcycle, and at the time I had a bit of muscle, so they suggested me, and I went in to do my audition, and it went well. And she said afterwards, she goes, "I'm not supposed to say it, but I think you're going to be busy this summer. Are you available? Because I think you're going to get this job." And I was like, yes, yes. I didn't know what film meant. I just like, I'm rich. I am rich. I have millions of dollars. Oh my God. Instead of going home, I went to the Rolls Royce dealer, and I was just like, but it didn't work out that way. So I went back to my dad's office, and I told him he was excited, and we chatted a bit about it. And then I got a call that afternoon saying they saw the tape and they loved you, but they don't think you have enough experience, so you're not going to get it. They went a different way. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not rich. I have to cancel the Rolls Royce. And it was just like, oh my gosh, this sucks. So such a high and such a low. And then I was miserable for 24 hours, and then went back the next day. I think it was a Wednesday, and they called, and she said, can you be in, at the time, this was in Edmonton, which is further north. That's where they were shooting the series. She goes, can you be in Edmonton tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock? And I'm like, yeah, of course I can. And she goes, it's not a job. They just want to meet you. They were worried that in your audition, you were such a a-hole that they want to make sure that that was the performance and not that's who you are.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, okay, I don't think I'm that, so okay, I'll go. So I was so excited. So I'm back up to, like, called Rolls Royce right away. I'm like, no, we're back on. And but then so I went up there and I met, and the producer, it was really nothing. He just sat me down and he's like, listen, I just wanted to meet you. You'll be working a lot with our lead actress and our lead guy, and I didn't want to subject them to somebody who was so arrogant and rude. And but your performance was exactly what we're looking for, and you seem like a nice enough guy. So he slid over a contract right then and there, and I signed, and that was it. So I drove all the way back to Calgary that afternoon, just flying,
right.
And told my dad, and then I had a shift at the country club that night, and I was walking in. I'm like, why am I don't want to be here. This is terrible. I just want to go and do my job now. And the guy who had hired me, Jim Sherlock, who was friends with my dad, and he was the manager of the country club, he saw me at the entrance in a big long driveway into the club, and he picks me up and he's asking me how it's going, and I told him, and he was so excited for me. He's like, no, you're not doing a shift. Get out of here. Go. I'll cover it for you. So it was great, and that was that.
So then after that, was there a long time between that one and the next one?
No, there's a lot of funny audition stories I could tell you, but I had I did that show for a whole season. It got me out to Vancouver at the time, and it got me an agent, and it got me, representation. It got me a little bit of buzz, and I think I did a few little guest stars here and there, and then I hit a bit of a lull. I thought this is the way it's always going to be, and
right.
You kind of get ahead of yourself with finance, and you just all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's stopped, and then you don't understand why it stops. And it stops often, you know,
right.
And there are stalls in careers, and you second guess things. And
so when you had those lulls, did you ever have any doubts, or was it kind of like, because you already had so much success and had so much fun with it?
I definitely had doubts, but just that little bit of success in the theater school and success right out in film gave me enough belief to weather most of it. And I'd never really liked anything else. I didn't know what else I could do. And so I don't have a lot of great qualities, but I would say one of the ones that I have is that I'm pretty tenacious. Like I don't quit something. If I like it, it doesn't matter if it's successful or not, I stick with it. And so I stuck with it, and there were definitely lulls, but there were a lot of high points too. And so it paid off in the end.
Well, I would think anybody, see, the other person on the set that I think it had to be just obvious to the people that knew you, because I'm assuming you were this entertaining. Well, of course you were. You told me about putting on the crazy scuba suit or something like that,
yeah.
where, and the, on the
fur
bus,
coats and driving around,
just to see how people would respond.
Yep.
Where all of a sudden you'd become an actor and be like, no, like the stuff that I'll post used to even to me, nobody in my high school was surprised.
Right.
And I have to think the same thing for you.
Honestly, I don't know. I had lots of friends in school, but I was not close with anybody except for Ron. So I got along with everybody, but I wasn't a large-ish personality in school. Like I wasn't. I didn't really develop much of a sense of humor until Ronnie and I started on Friday and Saturday nights watching SCTV. It was later. It was really sort of like high school, and by that point, most of my friendships were outside of school.
The other person I think about that is Pascal, because
Sure.
like her mom and drama and all this stuff where everybody's like,
And the opera training
Yeah.
and all that stuff.
it's like,
Yeah.
of course, and then having you two here, but I mean, what a crime against humanity that you'd be doing annuities, just being the most entertaining guy at the Christmas party,
Well, I don't know if that would have ended up happening, but the annuity thing, I knew instinctively I got that one right. I avoided that one. My father, he was never happy in that field.
Oh, sure.
He was not a happy dude. So I'm like, woof, this is not going to end well for me. And I didn't care enough about money for that. So I wanted to do something. When I was young and first starting this, I was like, I wanted to be an artist. I'm like, yeah, I'll probably struggle. It's going to suck. I'll be miserable, but it'll be cool.
Right.
And then I'm like, I don't want to be miserable at all.
Right.
That's terrible. But I did manage to avoid that fate.
Well, you have a lot of stuff that I've enjoyed, and Tiffany's enjoyed, like 4400. I remember talking
That
about
was another
that.
one. You asked about some shows that have gone along. 4400 went for a while too. That was fun. I enjoyed that.
And you were great in it, and I enjoyed. And then Eureka,
Yeah,
which
Eureka
is like
was
the
super
closest thing that to you, I think, that I've seen online.
Yes,
I even
and it's a robot.
yeah, well, this funny robot.
Yeah, he's a
you
funny
know.
robot.
And then I had my Smallville phase where I was into Smallville.
Yeah,
and saw
I
you
did
in
that.
Smallville, and so was there ever anything that your dad saw that you watched you in that he was like, wow, this is cool. My son's.
I do remember when I told him, like I told you, I told my mom that I dropped out of university, and I remember telling my father, and it was him and I alone at a Mexican restaurant, and he had ordered a beer and a tequila shot, and when I told him, he's like, one more tequila shot, please. and I remember him saying to me, he's like, so let me get this straight. And I knew he would not be supportive. Like,
Right.
He's not the kind of guy that was into that sort of thing at all. And I knew it was going to be an awkward conversation. And he said, so let me get this straight. You want to what? You want to be what? The next Tom Cruise or something? And I remember thinking, well, that's not so bad. Like, I could think of worse. But I remember, no, the first and only me is good enough for that. And I was surprised at how quickly, it might have been the tequila, but he turned it around fairly quickly. And he's like, okay, well, cool. If that's what you want to do, great. What can I do to support? And I remember when I went to theater school, there is a segue, and I wasn't going to tell, but I will. When I first dropped out of university, I did come out to BC to try and be an actor. I didn't know what it meant, so before theater school, I came out to BC, and my grandparents lived in Vancouver, so I stayed with them in their basement. And I remember, I'm like, okay, I'm here to be an actor.
Right.
And I remember, I'm like, well, I guess I need an agent. So I looked up agents, and I called the biggest agency in town. I'm like, hey, so my name's Kavan Smith, and I want to be an actor. And they're like, okay. I'm like, what do I do? And they're like, what do you mean, what do you do? I'm like, well, what do I do? And they're like, well, do you have headshots? Do you have any education? Do you have any training? I'm like, oh, I should have looked into that.
Right.
So I got a job as a waiter for a very short period of time because my grandparents couldn't stay there. And it was miserable. It was horrible. It was so depressing. It was the most depressing time in my life. And I remember I got a job selling encyclopedias door to door. And I only took the job because they paid for the week of training.
Right.
And I needed money. I had a 120 square foot room with a hot plate and a little mini fridge and a shared bathroom at the end of the hall. And it was extremely depressing. And I remember my father called that night. And he called, and I told him about the encyclopedia job. And he's like, great, good. Yeah, it'd be good for you. It's some struggle, tough. Go see what it's like to sell things door to door. That's a hard job. Build some character. And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't think I have this in me. And I guess he sensed something in my voice, some waffle, I don't know, maybe his dad's sense was tingling. And he was on the board of the YMCA in our hometown, and another woman who was on the board was the head of the theater department at the Mount Royal University. And so unbeknownst to me, the next morning, he called her, And she's like, yeah, we're finished our auditions for the season, but because it's you and I'll see him. If he really wants to come in, get him to prepare a couple auditions. So my dad drove out from Calgary to Vancouver the next day, picked me up, drove all my stuff back to Calgary, and I auditioned and I got in. And so I do owe him for that. And so there was that little segue first before I went to theater school.
Thanks for sharing. That's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your mom had to be excited. It was her idea when you got into acting and like when you landed the roles.
She was supportive of it. She lived in a different city than I
Yeah.
did. We didn't see each other all that often, but she's always been pretty supportive. But where I was going with this is my father, support when I first got my first gig. When I finally did get into the theater school and we had our first play, my dad was the first guy there the night of the first play. And so for a guy that I thought was going to be really against it, thinking it was a stupid choice, he was there and he walked through it. He went to the whole after party and, he went to every play I ever did. So I've never asked him about any film gigs, though. I'm assuming he's seen some, but...
Well, you've got such a body of work. I mean,
There's a fair
you
bit.
you just kind of, if you're running into something filmed in Canada, there's a shot.
Yeah, there's a chance.
Over that time. What was the most excited you remember ever being, or of a role that you landed, that you thought, that you just were stoked? I don't know. I always ask, I made it, I've arrived, it's official. But nobody ever.
Yeah.
I asked that question, and nobody's ever like, I'm still waiting for it. Almost.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No. Well, I'm still waiting for it.
Yeah.
No. I've had a bunch. I lived in LA for years, and I was very close a lot of times to some very big shows that would have been career changing. And before we get into answering your question, I will say this: not getting those things and having not skyrocket or achieved to the lofty expectations I had for myself. And I do use the word mediocrity, even though I don't necessarily mean it, but the mediocrity of my career, I think, was the making of me as a man. So I think that if any of those big opportunities had happened, I don't know that I would have liked the person that I probably would have become. I think I needed more struggle, more middle of the road stuff. I met my wife, my family, my kids, and I think that's the road that I was supposed to take. But that being said, there have been a few that when I got Mission to Mars and it was a De Palma film, I was such a De Palma fan, and it paid incredibly well, and I worked on it with friends. I had just done a Mars movie months previously with a friend of mine. His name is Peter Outerbridge, a Canadian actor, and he played an American astronaut, and I played a Russian astronaut, and it was called Mission to Mars. Then they had to change their name because Mission to Mars picked it up, and they were Escape from Mars. And then we both got Mission to Mars. He played a Russian, and I played an American astronaut. It was quite ironic. But it was a ball. It was interesting to be on a show. I think at the time it was the most expensive movie ever made, or one of the top 3 or 4 most expensive movies. It was like $260 million. It was a lot. I forget. Don't quote me on that. It was a very expensive movie, and the toys we had were phenomenal. A super exciting experience. Tim Robbins, Gary Sinise, Don Cheadle. It was really fun. It was a big. We did the premiere at the El Cap, and it was really fun. It was exciting.
And but it's so interesting because of that seemed like you got that job and it was so huge. And when you got the Wind Calls to Heart job, you didn't think.
No, I didn't want it. I'm no joke. I turned it down a bunch of times. I was like, nah, I don't think this is for me. And then Neil Fernley, who was the director of Escape from Mars, believe it or not. And if God rest his soul, but I have a good story I'll come back to on that. But it was. I tried to do 2 stories at once and I lost myself. Where was I going?
Well, one was when you didn't want the job.
Yes, on this one. So Neil called me up and he's like, come on, just stop messing around. Just come here. Just want to see if you have any chemistry with Pascal. My wife had introduced me once to Pascal briefly for like 5 minutes. I thought, yeah, I could see us getting along okay. So I went in and the rest is history. To go back to the other story, that was the other Mars movie was almost just as fun because we were in spacesuits the whole time. We had these little Comtex on, and they couldn't turn them on and off. So I had a captive audience, and it was like I had the funniest stuff I've ever had come out of me on that show, and I couldn't stop, and they couldn't stop me. And I was just never-ending jokes. I couldn't, like, we couldn't get through any takes of any kind. And finally, on our last day, we were trying so hard, and I was refusing to shut up. And I kept cracking up this one actor, and finally Neil's like, Kavan! I'm like, yep, I know. I'm off. And I left. He goes, get off my set, in a very amicable kind of way. But so he finally did kick me off the show.
I just thought maybe they'd turn off your mic and you're just
You can't.
talking
They couldn't
to
back then.
yourself.
For some reason, no, they couldn't. They could not shut me up. There was something wrong. It was freezing cold. It was like minus 30. And for some reason, they couldn't get control of they couldn't shut us off.
Some of my favorite outtakes, you're not even on the screen, but you're off screen. Like you're saying
Sure.
something or some little comedic moment, and the stuff between you and Pascal. And
Yeah, it's fun.
As fun as it is to watch them, I've still yet to really see it captured outside of when I see you guys on a panel together.
Yeah, that can be quite fun when you're impulsive and it's free reign, like when you can just riff and there are no constraints of a script or censorship. We have a ball when we go places. Okay, I'll tell a brief little story. We were in Hawaii shooting a movie one time, and we were sitting in a courtyard of this outdoor mall, and we were, I think, getting smoothies or something. And we were talking, having a bit of a heart-to-heart, and she's like, talking about working away from home and stuff like that. And I remember she said to me, oh, my agent knows full well I won't even look at something if it takes me away from my family. I'm like,
You're in Hawaii.
we're in Hawaii. And I laughed so hard that my whole fruit shake came out of my nose, and we were laughing for like half an hour just at the ridiculousness of that moment. And I think that's one of the things, the thing that she and I have bonded on over the years is a sense of humor. She doesn't take herself too seriously. I don't take myself seriously at all. And who wouldn't want a job where you just laugh so hard all day long? It's a very, I feel very blessed that I stuck it out all these years, because it can be a very rewarding job as well.
Yeah. Well, I thought you were going to say that she was going to say something like, I won't even do anything unless...
God, no. No, she'll do anything without me.
Yeah, I know, but it was
harder
because
getting...
it's so fun.
Yeah, we do have fun. We do have fun. And there's also when you work with somebody new, especially because we're not young anymore and we have families, wives, husband, kids, like we all hang out and we have a ball and we're productive, and we, generally speaking, we have another story. We were in Hawaii. Everybody's telling us what the best food to have was. And we're like, great, okay. And on Saturday, I was going to go and do that. I call her up Saturday morning. I'm like, so are we going? She goes, no, I don't think I'm going to go. Just not feeling it. I'm like, okay, all right, well, I'm going. And I'm like, see you later. And she calls back, and she goes, what, you're going without me? I'm like, well, yeah, I told these guys I was going to go try the food. I'm going to go try the food. And she goes, fine, I'll go. And we ended up having the most fun we had on the whole trip. We were eating this stuff that was like inedible. No offense to the Hawaiians. It was inedible.
Right.
Like, just, like, what?
I know that white stuff.
Just laughing so hard, just tears come pouring out of our eyes. And, she almost missed it. But, so it was, little things like that. You were asking before, or your compatriot was asking before, about the scene that we shot in the jail and why in previous years Pascal said we may not have had it. And it's because you build up years and years and years and years and layers of depth that just do most of the acting for you.
Right.
And but that was part of building those layers. Hopefully we'll get to build some more.
Yeah, well, whenever you guys come in, it's always an ab workout. And thank you for being so generous with us over the years. I could sincerely talk to you all day. I feel like we should do this as like a trilogy.
Yeah, sure.
But for now, thanks for coming in.
Yeah,
we'll see you
pleasure.
again. Yeah, keep watching Kavan Smith on Wind Calls Heart, God willing, for the next, he's over here, and then, and for the next 13 seasons.